I used to believe my dad loved me, not in the fairy tale, unconditional kind of way, but enough to have my back when it mattered, enough to at least see me as his daughter first, instead of a disposable extra in the life he built after Mom died. But I was wrong. So wrong. Growing up, it was just the two of us. My mother passed away when I was 8, and my dad, Mark, did his best, or at least that's what I thought at the time. He worked long hours and wasn't the warmest man, but he put food on the table and always reminded me to study hard. "You've got to be independent, Claire," he'd say. "No one's going to hand you anything in life." And I took his words to heart. By the time I was 25, I had a solid career in marketing, a stable income, and a decent amount of savings tucked away. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. Then Lisa and Jake entered the picture. Lisa was my dad's new wife, and Jake was her 22-year-old son. He was everything I wasn't spoiled, entitled, and used to being handed everything on a silver platter. Where I had worked through college, balancing part-time jobs with my studies, Jake had never worked a day in his life. "He's young," Lisa would say dismissively whenever I asked if he planned on getting a job. "He's still figuring things out." I wanted to like them. Really, I did. My dad seemed happy for the first time in years, and despite the nagging feeling that something was off about the whole situation, I tried to give them a chance. But it didn't take long for me to realize where I stood in this newly blended family on the outskirts, watching as my father doted on Jake like he was his own flesh and blood, while I became nothing more than an afterthought. At first, it was little things. Jake got a brand new car for his 21st birthday, even though my dad had refused to help me with a down payment for a used one when I was in college. He was showered with expensive gifts, designer clothes, the latest gadgets, while I got a generic "hope you're doing well" text on my birthday. Then it escalated. Jake had a new hobby every few months. One day, it was photography. The next, it was music production. Each time, my dad would pour money into his latest obsession top-tier cameras, expensive editing software, state-of-the-art equipment only for Jake to get bored and move on to something else. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it wasn't my problem. My dad could spend his money however he wanted, even if that meant bankrolling his stepson's lifestyle while barely acknowledging me. But then, one day, I noticed something strange in my bank account. A withdrawal I didn't recognize, then another and another. I stared at the transactions, my stomach twisting into knots. Thousands of dollars had vanished from my savings account, and the only person who had access besides me was my father. A sinking realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He had taken my money. I didn't want to believe it. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a mistake, a bank error. Maybe, just maybe, there was some way this wasn't exactly what it looked like. But when I confronted my dad, his response shattered any last hope I had. "Oh, that?" he said casually, as if he hadn't just stolen from me. "I transferred some money to help Jake out. He's got real talent, Claire. His motorcycle racing could really take off, but he needed better equipment." I could barely breathe. "You stole from me," my dad scoffed, as if I was the unreasonable one. "I didn't steal anything. That account was set up when you were a kid, and my name's still on it. Technically, it's not just yours." My hands shook. "That money was mine. I earned it. You had no right." "Oh, come on," he interrupted, rolling his eyes. "Jake actually has a shot at doing something amazing, unlike you." That was the moment something inside me broke. I had spent my entire life believing that if I worked hard, if I stayed responsible, if I did everything right, then I would at least have the respect of my own father, but in his eyes, I would never be enough, not compared to Jake. I stood there, my fists clenched so tightly, my nails dug into my palms, and I made a decision. He thought he could steal from me and get away with it. He thought I would just take it. But he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, staring at the bank statements, scrolling through transaction after transaction, my anger growing with each dollar missing. It wasn't just a couple of withdrawals. He had been taking money for months, thousands of dollars, drained from the savings I had built up through years of careful budgeting and discipline. And all of it had gone to Jake, for his motorcycle racing, of all things. I knew Jake had picked up racing as his newest obsession, but I never imagined my own money was funding it. My father wasn't just helping him buy a bike. He had spent my hard-earned money on new gear, repairs, custom upgrades, even entry fees for competitions. I wanted to believe there was a mistake, some kind of mix-up, but deep down, I knew better. When morning came, I drove to my father's house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My stomach was in knots, but I wasn't backing down. Lisa opened the door, her expression immediately turning into a fake smile when she saw me. "Oh, Claire, what a surprise," she said, though there was a certain stiffness in her voice, like she already sensed I wasn't here for pleasantries. "Your dad's in the garage with Jake." Of course he was. I pushed past her without another word, my legs moving on autopilot. As soon as I stepped into the garage, I saw them. My father crouched beside Jake's sleek new motorcycle, the two of them laughing over something as they tinkered with the engine. My heart pounded with rage. "Dad!" I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. Both of them turned to look at me. "We need to talk. Now." My father stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Claire, what's with the attitude?" I pulled out my phone and held it up. "You've been stealing from me." His expression barely flickered. "Lower your voice." "No." My voice only grew louder. "You took thousands from my account, my savings. You stole from me to fund his stupid hobby." Jake scoffed, crossing his arms. "Relax, it's not a big deal." I turned on him, fury surging through me. "Not a big deal? That money was mine. I worked for it, I saved it, and you." I looked back at my father, my voice shaking. "You just took it like I wouldn't notice?" He exhaled sharply, as if I was being dramatic. "Claire, you're overreacting. That account was set up when you were a kid, and I still had access. I was just reallocating family resources." "Reallocating?" I repeated in disbelief. "You mean stealing?" His jaw tightened. "Watch your tone." I let out a hollow laugh. "Are you serious? You're telling me to watch my tone when you've been draining my account behind my back?" Jake rolled his eyes. "Dad, why are we even talking about this? You were just helping me out. Claire doesn't even need the money." Something in me snapped. I turned on him, my voice dangerously low. "You entitled little leech," I spat. "I don't need the money. That's not the point. The point is, it's mine. I worked my ass off for it while you were sitting here playing Racer Boy on my dime." Jake's smirk faltered. "Geez, Claire, get over yourself." "Enough," my father barked. "Claire, this isn't what you think. It was temporary. I was going to put the money back." I folded my arms. "Oh, really? When? After Jake finished burning through all of it?" My father's face darkened. "You don't understand. Jake has real talent. This could be his future. And as his family, we should support him." I stared at him, my pulse roaring in my ears. There it was, the truth. Jake was his priority, not me. Not the daughter who had been there before Lisa. Not the daughter who had worked and saved, who had built something for herself without asking for a damn thing. And now, when I stood before him, demanding basic respect, he looked at me like I was the problem. I felt my hands shake. I was so angry, so betrayed, I could barely breathe. But then, a strange calm settled over me. Fine. If he wanted to treat me like I was nothing, then I would show him what nothing felt like. I straightened my shoulders. "You know what? I don't care about your excuses. You stole from me, and there are consequences for that." My father's brows furrowed. "Claire!" "No," I interrupted coldly. "We're done talking. I'll be in touch through my lawyer." His face drained of color. Lisa, who had been listening from the doorway, let out a nervous laugh. "Come on, Claire, let's not be rash." I didn't stay to hear the rest. I walked out of that garage, my head held high, my heart pounding. He thought he could steal from me and get away with it. He thought I'd roll over like I always did. He had no idea what was coming. I wasted no time. The moment I got home, I contacted a lawyer. "Your father had access to your account?" Mr. Lawson, my attorney, asked, his brows furrowing over the Zoom call. "He was listed as a co-signer from when I was a teenager," I admitted. "I never removed him because I never thought—" I stopped myself. That was the problem, wasn't it? I had trusted him. Mr. Lawson sighed. "Legally, it's murky. He had access, but if you never authorized those transactions, we can argue fraud and misappropriation of funds." "What do I need to do?" I asked, steel in my voice. "First, go to your bank and freeze the account immediately. We'll gather evidence, file a fraud report, and draft a legal claim demanding repayment. If he refuses, we take it to court." I nodded. "Let's do it." The next morning, I walked into the bank, my stomach in knots. I explained the situation to a bank representative, and within minutes, my account was locked down. No more withdrawals, no more access, and then I moved everything to a new account, one my father would never see a dime from. I wasn't naive. I knew the moment he realized the money tap was turned off, he'd come running. And I was right. That evening, my phone rang. My father's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then another call, and another. By the fourth, I picked up. "What the hell did you do?" His voice exploded through the speaker. "Hello to you too, Dad," I said coolly. "I see you tried to take more of my money today." His breath came sharp and fast. "Claire, you're being ridiculous. I just needed to cover some expenses for Jake's upcoming race." I laughed, the sound hollow. "Oh, you mean my money? The money you stole?" His voice hardened. "I didn't steal from you. That account is mine." I cut him off. "And now, you can't touch another cent." Silence stretched between us before he sighed, switching tactics. "Listen, sweetheart. This is just a misunderstanding. You're taking this way too far." "Oh, am I?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because my lawyer disagrees. Oh, and by the way, you'll be getting official papers soon. I want every dollar back," he scoffed. "Claire, don't be dramatic. We're family." I clenched my jaw. Funny how you only remember that when you're backed into a corner. A beat of silence. Then his voice turned cold. "You really want to do this?" "I am doing this." "Fine," he snapped. "You want to act like this? You're on your own." The words should have hurt, but all I felt was relief. I hung up without another word. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. First, my stepmother Lisa called, her voice dripping with artificial concern. "Claire, sweetie, your father is devastated." I rolled my eyes. "I bet he is." "He was just trying to help Jake. He didn't mean to upset you." "Right. He just meant to rob me blind." Lisa sighed dramatically. "You know, you've always been so difficult." I hung up. Then came the family gossip. Somehow, word spread that I was attacking my father over a little money. A few relatives reached out, trying to guilt-trip me into backing down. "Claire, honey, your father raised you," Aunt Deb said. "And you're taking legal action against him? Isn't that a little extreme?" "Oh, I don't know, Deb. If someone stole from you, would you just let it slide?" "That's different, sweetheart." "Is it?" She floundered for a response. I hung up on her too. Then my father got desperate. A few days later, I received a call from his job. "Hello, this is Claire." A deep voice sighed on the other end. "Ms. Daniels, this is Mr. Graves, your father's employer. I'm calling because Mark asked for a salary advance. He cited a family emergency. He mentioned you." My stomach dropped. I cleared my throat. "I'm sorry, Mr. Graves, but whatever my father told you, I don't have anything to do with it." A pause. Then, "That's what I figured." His tone sharpened. "We don't tolerate financial misconduct here. I appreciate the clarity." I had no idea what that meant for my father, but I didn't care. That night, Lisa left me a furious voicemail. "You humiliated him at work. Are you happy now?" I was. The legal process moved forward. My father received the official demand letter outlining the fraudulent transactions and my intent to press charges if the money wasn't returned. And then, radio silence. For 2 weeks, he didn't call, didn't try to reach out. Then, suddenly, he did. I arrived home one evening to find him waiting outside my apartment. He looked older, stressed. "Claire," he said, his voice unusually soft. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "Make it quick?" He sighed. I messed up." I said nothing. He ran a hand through his graying hair. "I just wanted to help Jake. He needed—" "Don't," I warned. "Don't make excuses." He swallowed hard. "I can't pay it all back at once." I studied him. "Then we'll see you in court." His face paled. "Claire, please. You don't have to do this." I tilted my head. "You didn't have to steal from me." He exhaled sharply. "I'll pay you back," he muttered. "I just need time." "Put it in writing." He looked at me, startled. "You will sign a legally binding repayment agreement," I said firmly. "And if you miss one payment, I move forward with the charges." Defeat settled in his shoulders. "Fine." And just like that, the power shifted. The repayment agreement was drafted and signed. I made sure of it. The first payment came through a week later, then another. Lisa and Jake, they stayed quiet. With my father financially crippled, Jake's racing days were over. I heard through the grapevine that Lisa was furious, but she wasn't my problem. And my father? He lost my trust. He lost the privilege of calling me his daughter. And as for me, I got everything he owed me. The first payment bounced. I shouldn't have been surprised. I had given my father one chance to do the right thing, to take responsibility for what he had done, and he had still managed to screw it up. I stared at the notification from my bank, my jaw tightening. This wasn't a mistake. He chose this. He thought he could get away with it. Big mistake. I immediately called Mr. Lawson. "File the charges," I said, my voice steady. He didn't even hesitate. "Consider it done." The fraud case officially moved forward. My father would soon be facing legal consequences, real ones, not just my threats. And then, predictably, he panicked. I was leaving work when my phone rang. My father's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then Lisa called. I ignored her too. By the time I reached my car, there were 6 missed calls. I sighed, unlocking my phone just as another one came in. This time, it was Jake. Curious, I picked up. "What do you want?" "You ruined everything," he exploded. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I laughed, genuinely amused. "Oh, I understand perfectly. My racing season is over because of you," he seethed. "Do you have any idea how much money you've cost us?" "Us?" I repeated mockingly. "That's cute. You do realize I was never part of that us, right? You were just mooching off my money, and now you have to face reality like the rest of us." "You're such a bitter bitch," he spat. "You just couldn't handle that Dad cared about me more than you." That hit a nerve. I took a slow, measured breath. "No, Jake. What I couldn't handle was being stolen from and disrespected by my own father, while some spoiled brat acted like he was entitled to my hard-earned money." He scoffed. "It's not like you needed it." "And now you don't have it either," I shot back. "Funny how that works." Before he could reply, I hung up. I wasn't done yet. The next day, I received an urgent call from Mr. Lawson. "Your father's lawyer reached out," he said. "They're asking if we'll drop the charges in exchange for an alternative repayment plan." I snorted. "And what exactly are they proposing?" "They want to negotiate a smaller sum with extended payments." I nearly laughed. "Absolutely not," Mr. Lawson chuckled. "I figured as much. I'll let them know we're proceeding with the case." Later that evening, my father showed up at my apartment. I debated not answering, but some small vindictive part of me wanted to see him grovel. When I opened the door, he looked like a man on the verge of collapse. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes tired. "Claire," he said, his voice raw. I leaned against the doorframe. "What do you want?" He swallowed hard. "Can we talk?" I folded my arms. "You mean like we did before? When I told you I'd take legal action if you didn't pay me back? And you agreed?" He exhaled shakily. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." That made my blood boil. You thought I was bluffing? I thought you'd understand. I laughed bitterly. Understand what, Dad? That you prioritized Jake over your own daughter? That you stole from me and expected no consequences? He winced. I wasn't thinking. No, you were thinking. I cut him off. You just didn't think I'd fight back. His shoulders slumped. Claire, please. If this goes to court, it'll ruin me. I tilted my head. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. He looked desperate now. I'll figure something out. Just don't do this. I stared at him for a long moment, and then I smiled. No. His face crumbled. You made your choice, I said calmly, and now you get to live with it. I shut the door in his face. The fraud charges went through. My father was forced to appear in court. It was a disaster for him. Not only was he ordered to pay back every cent, but the case became public knowledge. His employer caught wind of it, and suddenly, he wasn't just a bad father, he was an embezzler. I later found out he was fired. Lisa, who had been riding the wave of his income, packed her bags and left him. And Jake? Without a financial sponsor, his racing career was officially dead. I didn't feel guilty, not one bit, because for the first time in my life, I had chosen myself, and I won. I wish I could say my father learned his lesson, that after losing his job, his wife, and his precious golden boy's racing dreams, he had some kind of grand realization about how horribly he had treated me. But life isn't a movie, and people like my father, they don't change. The court ordered him to repay every cent he had taken from me, and with no job, no financial support, and no more access to my accounts, reality came crashing down on him fast. At first, he tried to stall. He missed payments, made excuses, claimed he was working on it, but the court didn't care about his sob stories. The legal agreement ensured that if he didn't make payments on time, he would face wage garnishment and asset seizure. And so, for the first time in years, my father had to figure out how to fend for himself without using me as his safety net. A few months after the case was settled, I got an email from him. Subject, "Can we talk?" Claire, I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I made mistakes, but I was only trying to help Jake succeed. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, can we talk? I stared at the email for a long time. I could almost hear his voice in the words calculated, measured, careful not to take real responsibility. No apology for stealing from me. No acknowledgement of the years he had spent pushing me aside. Just another attempt to make himself feel better. I closed the email. I didn't respond. The updates on his downfall came in bits and pieces through the family gossip mill. Lisa had taken off the moment his finances crumbled, leaving him alone to deal with the wreckage. Jake, ever the opportunist, tried reaching out to me, probably hoping I'd take pity on him now that his mother had dumped him on his own father. That call lasted exactly 30 seconds before I laughed in his ear and hung up. As for my father, the man who had once belittled my achievements, who told me Jake was more talented than me, who thought he could steal from me without consequences, he was renting a cramped apartment on the other side of town, working a low-level job that barely covered his debts. And me? I was thriving. One afternoon, I met up with an old college friend for coffee. "You look great, Claire," she said, stirring her latte. "I saw the whole legal thing with your dad on Facebook. That was insane." I shrugged. "Yeah, it was a mess, but it's over now." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Be honest, do you regret it?" I took a sip of my coffee and smiled.